kidding. Good morning. Good morning. Is this the... Oh, there we go. All right. So we normally have a scripture, as you all know. That's kind of the normal procedure. Today we're going to do things a little differently, and I'll explain a little more why we don't have a dedicated scripture this morning. But I'd like everybody to take a look at this and tell me what you see. Just shout it out. What do you see there? Half empty. Half full? No, no, the same person can't answer twice. Half empty? Any half fulls? No, nobody's half full? Wow, tough crowd. So I wanted to talk a little about how we see things, right? What's our perspective? And do we have the right perspective? And so this was kind of the only thing I could find real quickly is this glass of water that may be half empty or maybe half full. I'm not exactly sure. But I just wanted to talk about how perspective really influences our lives and how important it is in our lives. Because perspective really does help determine everything that we do in our lives, and every experience that we have in our lives. It really helps us determine the choices that we make, who are we going to spend our time with, how we're going to invest our resources, how we're going to invest time in the relationships that we have, right? In the relationships that we make. It sets the priorities that we have in our lives, right? It's all about perspective. And it can ultimately determine our quality of life as well. And by nature, most of us have a perspective based on the moment that we're in, here and now, right? What's best for us now? What makes us feel the best now? We don't really think beyond that, other than the now. When we should sometimes think about things outside of what makes us feel the best now, right? So we're going to talk a little about that as well. But because of the fact that we think about the here and now and what makes us feel good and what makes us feel the best, we tend to run away from conflict. We tend to run away from confrontation or things that make us uncomfortable. And if we hit those things kind of head on, we'd probably find peace a little faster than we normally do. But because we focus on the here and now, and we don't have the right perspective, sometimes we kind of dig these deep holes for ourselves. And so we need to kind of figure out a way that we can dig ourselves out of that. And I think by having the right relationship with God, right, having the right perspective on things, we can actually figure out a way that we don't have to dig those holes, and that we can truly have a better change in our lives. And God, as we know, is not bound by the here and now. He's not bound by the same lifetimes that we experience in our lives. He's eternal. And God's actually created us to spend an eternity with him, and yet we fail to do that. We think about our lives as the 60 and 70 or 80, 90, maybe even 100 years. But outside of that, in a relationship with God, right, we don't have to worry about the finite of it, because God is the Alpha and he's the Omega. God is eternal. And we can have a life and a relation. If we have a relationship with God, we can have a life in eternity with God, because he can change our perspective and he can help us to do that. So I'm going to share with you just a few different things. The truth is that when we're genuinely on the right road, when we're on the right road with God, we automatically experience permanent change in our lives. And we have a different viewpoint. Our perspectives change when we're on the right road. We genuinely start to live out in his truth, and we start to live out his will, and we start to follow his ways. We start to really just truly be in relation with him. There's a few other things that we're going to talk about in addition to that, but really it all starts with a relationship with God. And if we're going to embrace this truth, we need to realize that there are actually right roads and there are wrong roads that we can go on. There's always a right way and a wrong way to get somewhere. And in Matthew, I don't know if you can see that very well, but Matthew chapter 7, verse 13 and 14 talks about, "For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads us to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So Jesus himself is saying that there are many roads in the world. There's so many roads in the world, and all of them are wrong except for one, the right road. Right? So it's kind of like we're all on a road trip. We're all on this road trip together. Hopefully we're all going to the same place, but we're all on this road trip together. And I don't know how many of you have been on a road trip, but if you look out the window on a road trip, right, the viewpoint and the view out the window can really make or break kind of that trip, right? If you have a nice view, it's really enjoyable. If not so much, it's probably not as fun. I'm going to share about a couple of trips that I've been on. But no matter what the circumstances, right, our perspective kind of determines how good or how bad that experience is going to be. And being in relationship with God, he's always such a good God. He's always doing good things for us. And so we need to stay on that right road. In fact, the Apostle Paul says in the book of Corinthians, chapter 2, verse 14, he says, "So fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." So if we're on the right road spiritually, it permanently changes our perspective. And because today will eventually be gone. As we talked about, our lives are finite. We're not going to be here forever. But we can spend an eternity with God as long as we have the right perspective. So I'm going to share with you a little about how do we know that when we're on the right road? Right? It's kind of going to be like a little guide. And I kind of alluded to a little earlier about why I didn't have a set scripture. Because the best guide that we have is the Bible. It's the Bible itself, right? So we're going to talk, we're going to see a lot of different scriptures on how the Bible guides us as we walk through this trip that or drive through this trip that we're on, however we're going to get there. We're going to talk a little about that. But one of the best ways, or the first ways that we can know that we're on the right road is the landmarks that we see. Now, nowadays, everybody has, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have cell phones, you have GPS, and we just talked about how the Bible is probably the best GPS there is out there. But back in the day, we used to have to use landmarks. So if I were to tell you how to get from here to there, I would tell you, you drive down the road until you see the 7-Eleven, and then you make a right, and then you'll see Dunkin' Donuts, and you make a left, and then you'll see a big statue of something, and you make another right. So we talked about the landmarks, right? And that's how we kind of found where we needed to go. And so those landmarks can actually make being on the right road kind of fun, or if there's no good landmarks, it's kind of like being on a desolate road like this. Now, a lot of you who know me know that I've driven a lot. And one of the worst drives that I've ever done in my life, and if you've done this drive and you've experienced something different, it's great. We just have a different perspective on things. But if anybody has ever driven on I-80 through the state of Nebraska, has anybody done that? Has anybody done that? Okay. So my experience looks something like this. Now, this is actually is just some stock image. But what I remember of Nebraska, driving from California, Utah to Michigan and back, is this. It's just desolate. It's the same on both sides. There's nothing to see. You know, when I first did this trip, I just watched a movie called Dances with Wolves. I was hoping I could see some buffalo. There's none of that. It was just desolate, dry, boring, and this was it. And every once in a while, probably more than once in a while, there was this awful smell of cow manure. There's a lot of cows, I guess, or beef farmers, I would think, in Nebraska. So this is what I would see. But in contrast to this, right, does anybody know what this is, what this stretch of highway is? Ian might know. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, this is PCH. This is a completely different experience. If anybody of you've driven down this road, it goes all the way down the West Coast. It's beautiful, right? On one side you have the ocean, other side you have some mountains. So there's always something different to see. It's beautiful. The perspectives are so different from this and this. And any road trip, the view can make or break, depending on the scenery and what your view is out the window. The same way, if we walk with God on the right road, if we walk on the right road, it kind of changes our viewpoint, and changes the scenery that we have. And so what's the right view? Right? In order to start having the right view, we need to make sure that God is the ultimate treasure that we live for. We need to long for God. We need to have a relationship with God. He needs to be more valuable than our resources, than our own personal resources. And I'm not talking about personal wealth. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about actual resources that we have in our lives. Resources like time. Time. We need to value God more than time. Many of us have heard the term time is money, right? Or my time is really valuable. A lot of people, I'm sure, think that. I think that all the time. So I'm talking to myself here more than I'm talking to anybody else, but God actually needs to be more valuable than our time. When we're on the right road, our time becomes worthless, right? What does our time matter? Our time is finite. God is eternal. So we need to make sure that God is more valuable than our time, and we need to stop focusing on how can I get this done and that done, and the busyness of our time, and focus on how can we be in a relationship with God. I don't know what happened to the time there, but another resource that we need to, that's very important, are our talents and abilities. And I apologize, I don't know what happened to the formatting there, but your talents and your abilities, the things that God gave you the capacity to do and to share with others. And it's important that we realize that we have this time and talent to use properly, because no matter how much money we have, if we lost it all, right? If we lost all our money, if we spent all our money, as long as we had time and we had our abilities, we can always make more. And so we need to make sure that our time and our abilities are being used to glorify God. Another personal resource is knowledge. We need to know how to spend our time. How do we spend these resources? How do we use our abilities? We have such a unique perspective on things. The things that we think about are not the same as what somebody else might think about. Right? My life experiences are definitely not going to be the same as anybody's here. Well, maybe some of the experiences might be. But our experiences of driving through Nebraska may or may not be the same, right? And so because we do have those differences, we all have great value in God's eyes. Our individualness, we have great value. You might not feel that somebody is important as you are. You might feel that somebody is more important than you are, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because we all need to work together and be in relationship with each other. We'll talk a little more about that a little later. But a lot of people, because they don't have the right perspective, right, they focus on kind of the wrong things. Why aren't I as smart as this person? Why don't I have as much money as this person? Why do I have these things and some people don't? Right? We think about all these different things. That is not the things that we need to be focusing on. That's not the perspective that we should have. And we need to be focusing on how can we change our perspectives, not only with our time and our talents and our knowledge, but how can we use all of those things to be in right relationship with God? The Bible says in Matthew chapter 13:46, he says, the kingdom of, I didn't write that one down, sorry. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. Actually, I did a little differently here. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy, he went out and he sold all that he had, and he bought the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything that he had and he bought it. So what Jesus is saying here is that when we find this treasure, when we find something that we truly find valuable, that we really want, we will do anything that we can to get it. We'll sell all that we have to get it. But why won't we do these things to be in relation with God? Why won't we give up everything that we have to know God, to know his love, to know his grace? Why can't we give up everything that we have to use what we have to get that ultimate treasure? Because when we're genuinely on the right road and we're genuinely in relationship with God, our viewpoints change, and all of that changes. Mark 8:36, Jesus puts it pretty bluntly, and he says, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? What good is it? Many of us invest so much in ourselves, but we don't really invest in others. God gives us some great examples of this. One is actually in the Bible in the book of Luke, chapter 16. It's kind of long, so we'll kind of paraphrase, but there's a story about a very wealthy man. And the wealthy man has everything. He has plenty of food, lots to eat, a lot of tangible things, a lot of great things. And then there's a man named Lazarus. And you can kind of see him, it's kind of cut off a little bit down in the corner there, but he has nothing. Lazarus doesn't have anything compared to this wealthy man. The wealthy man won't even give him the crumbs off of his table. But the one thing that Lazarus does have is an amazing perspective. He's got an amazing relationship with God. And at one point, at some time, both men die. But something very different happens, right? One spends an eternity of agony. This is the rich man, by the way, in case you haven't been able to figure that out. This is the rich man. He spends his whole eternity with God. And I apologize, what got cut off there is you can see that Lazarus is with God. And he gets to spend an eternity with all the treasures that we read about in the Bible in heaven with God, even though he had nothing here. So the view from the right road, it continues on when you're on the right road, and your perspectives change when you're in a relationship with God. It may happen very quickly, it may take a little time, but it will happen. Your perspective will change. And instead of heaping everything for yourself, right, we start to invest in other people. We start to say to ourselves, how can we love other people? How can we value others more than we value ourselves? I know it's really hard to do, but even to value somebody a little is something. It's a great start. We need to start seeing others just as important as ourselves. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. It says, "If I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have a gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but have not love, I am nothing." It's saying that you can have all the power and the talent and the resources of the world. You can have everything. Yet if you don't have love, if you don't love other people, you're useless. Yet most of us have that perspective. It's all about me. What can I do for me? How can I invest in myself? Ecclesiastes 4 talks about two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. Pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. We need to be in relationship with others. We need to value others. We need to have the right desires. We need to stop thinking all about ourselves and start investing in others. It's a very small world that we live in, especially if you're the only person you care about in that world. It becomes a very small world. So a great example of a treasure that we should all be looking for in our lives, or that people should have in our lives, it's a story about Adam. Right? Adam was the first man that was ever created, first book of the Bible. And Adam was created, but then came Eve. It's not because God made a mistake. Right? It's not because he forgot to create Eve. Right? But it's to remind us that God's plan for man was not to be alone. We need other people. Our life is not complete without others. Our life is not complete unless we love others. Adam had everything in the Garden of Eden. He could do what he wanted. He ruled over everything. There's one rule, of course, and we know about that, but for the most part, he had everything. But he still had nothing because he did not have Eve. So when we're on the right road spiritually, there's another thing that kind of happens to our view, and we start to see something else out the windows of our lives. We start to understand that when we use our resources, not for our own benefit, but for the benefit of others, and when we start to use our resources to glorify God and be in relationship with him, that we're not wasting our time. We're not wasting our abilities. We're not wasting those resources that we have. It even tells us not to do that. In Matthew, it says, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Jesus is saying that when we're on the right road, their treasures will be in heaven, not on earth. We saw that, we can't really see, I'm sorry, but we saw that Lazarus, it was the same thing. He didn't have a whole lot here on this earth. All his treasures would be in heaven. And by investing in other people and by investing in a relationship with God, we can have that same thing. In a similar vein, there was I think I have it here. Yeah. There was a rich man in the book of Luke. I think they call him a rich fool. I mean, he was super rich. He had this bumper crop one year. And what he decided to do, rather than taking all of this crop and sharing it with all the people around him in his community, instead, what did he go out to do? This is what it says. It says, "The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' And then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my grain and all my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, be merry.'" Right? And God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich with God. Only a fool lives for themselves, and the wise live for others. Let's not be fools. Okay? Let's change the view out of our window. There's another view when we're on the right road, and it's a view that's best use of resources in honoring God and in helping people. We've talked a bit about that. One thing we're reminded of every week in 2 Corinthians, right? Each man should give what he has decided to give in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So we're reminded of that. But it goes on a little more, and it says, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. When you give money or resources that you have to others, or you supply others, invest in others, especially their needs that they might be lacking, that is how we can get on the right road. You're not just helping people, you're honoring God. And that's the view from the right road. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be on him? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. That came from 1 John. So many of us get caught up with what we don't have. I mean, how can we share what we have with others when we have so little? Right? But it's not about that. As we talked about earlier, if we have time and we have ability, we can actually restore all of that. We can make more. We can get more. I'm going to talk about, as we wrap up a little bit here, about the Good Samaritan. I know everybody knows this story, right? And so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But basically, it's about a guy who gets beaten up, and he's laying on the side of a road. And these two religious leaders, who happen to be the same culture, the same religion as man, look at him and they walk right by. They just ignore him. Right? Two, not just one, but two do the exact same thing. But then there's somebody from Samaria. And if you know a little about the history, the Jews and Samaritans don't really like each other. They don't get along. We see kind of like a lot about what's going on in the world. It's something similar to this. People just don't like each other for whatever reason. So this is a person that you would think would walk right on by. But instead, he stops. He bandages him up. But then he goes one step beyond that. He puts him on his donkey. He takes him to an inn. And he pays the innkeeper, not just for the man's stay, but any additional expenses. He says, hey, you know what? I will pay for anything, whatever he needs to take care of him. And on my way back, if this isn't enough to cover it, I will pay you what needs to be paid. This is the example that we should all be living by, is investing in other people. Jesus taught us that the two who thought they were on the right road, these religious leaders, they were actually on the wrong road. And the one who thought that was on the wrong road was actually on the right road. We need to decide, which road are we on? Because the truth is, we're not here to serve ourselves. We were created to serve others and to serve God. We don't honor God by serving ourselves. We honor God by serving others. If we get beat up and we get beat up and ravaged by life, we need to be like the Good Samaritan. We need to help those bruised and battered people. Life begins when we start giving up our resources for God and for others, not just hoarding it for ourselves. Our quality of life will actually be different once we start doing that. So I'm going to kind of summarize a few different things that we already talked about. But if you and I really want to make sure that we're on the right road, we need to make sure about three things. Right? The first is that we must value and invest in God. Must value and invest in God. We need to make the choice that God is going to be our greatest treasure. He's going to be more valuable than anything else. And if we have the right relationship with God, then we go one step further and we value and invest in others. People need to become important to us. John 13:34-35 says, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. We need to start valuing and investing in other people. We need to start serving. We need to be there for other people. We need to set aside some of our time for other people. That's when the view out the window of our life starts changing. And that's how we can know that we're on the right road. And finally, I'm going to ask the praise team to come up if they may. Finally, I want to remind you, in Mark 8:38 says, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? You need to start investing your resources rather than just hoarding them. And the best way that we can do this, the best way that we can actually start sharing our resources is to share the gospel. It's the greatest resource of all. We can't hoard this treasure for ourselves, right? We need to share it with others. The best way to utilize all three applications that we already talked about is we need to value others, we need to invest in God, and we need to share the gospel. And this way we can ensure that we're on the right road and we have the right view out of our window. Thanks. Let's do the closing praise and then we'll pray. Thanks.
All right, can everyone stand for the closing song?